The children were standing in perfect formation in our backyard at 11:47 p.m., and that's when I knew we were going to die. 6 kids, ages maybe 8 to 12, arranged in 2 precise rows, like they were posing for a school photograph, all wearing identical white nightgowns despite the sweltering August heat, all staring up at our bedroom window with expressions that weren't quite human anymore. Their eyes reflected the moonlight like animals, and when my wife Laura gasped from beside me, all 6 heads turned toward our window in perfect unison, their necks moving with mechanical precision that made my stomach lurch with pure terror. But here's what made it infinitely worse. I recognized every single one of them. These were our neighbors' children from Maple Street, kids who should have been safely asleep in their beds 3 blocks away. Kids who had been reported missing by their frantic parents over the past 2 weeks. Kids who, according to the police investigation that had consumed our entire suburb, had simply vanished from their locked bedrooms without a trace. My name is Michael Chen, and I'm about to tell you about the night that destroyed everything I thought I understood about reality, safety, and the thin boundary between the world we see during daylight and the nightmare that emerges when darkness falls. It was August 15th, 2024, the hottest night of the summer in our quiet suburban neighborhood of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. The temperature hadn't dropped below 85 degrees even after sunset, and the humidity made it feel like we were breathing through wet cotton. Laura and I had given up on air conditioning around 10 p.m. when the power grid started failing, leaving half the neighborhood in rolling blackouts that made the August heat almost unbearable. We'd opened every window in our 2-story colonial house, hoping to catch any breeze that might provide relief from the oppressive temperature. The box fans we'd positioned in our bedroom window were pulling in air that felt like it was coming from a furnace, but it was better than the suffocating stillness of closed rooms. Laura works as a pediatric nurse at the Children's Hospital downtown, and she'd been pulling double shifts all week because half the staff was on vacation. I'm a high school history teacher, which means August is usually my time to relax and prepare for the upcoming school year. But this summer had been different. This summer had been consumed by fear. Over the past 2 weeks, 6 children had disappeared from our neighborhood under circumstances that defied explanation. Not kidnapped from parks or playgrounds, not lured away by strangers in white vans, but simply gone from their own bedrooms in the middle of the night, with no signs of forced entry, no evidence of struggle, and no witnesses to what had happened. The first disappearance was Emma Rodriguez, age 10, who vanished from her second-floor bedroom on August 1st. Her parents found her bed empty in the morning, window still locked from the inside, door closed, no indication that anyone had entered or left the room. Security cameras around the house showed no movement, no vehicles, no suspicious activity. 3 days later, it was Tommy Walsh, 8 years old, gone from his first-floor bedroom, despite his father's elaborate security system that monitored every door and window in the house. The system showed no breaches, no alarms, nothing to explain how a child could disappear from a locked house. Then Sarah Kim, age 11, followed by Jacob Martinez, 9, then the Peterson twins, both 12 years old. Each disappearance followed the same impossible pattern. Children vanishing from secure bedrooms in locked houses with no evidence of how they'd left or who might have taken them. The police were baffled. FBI child abduction specialists were called in. Search teams combed every inch of our suburb and the surrounding forest. Bloodhounds found no scent trails. Helicopters with thermal imaging detected no heat signatures. It was as if the children had simply ceased to exist. The community response was swift and predictable. Parents started sleeping in their children's rooms, installing additional locks, setting up cameras and motion sensors. Some families left town entirely, staying with relatives until the mystery could be solved. Others, like Laura and me, didn't have children of our own but found ourselves consumed by the fear that had gripped our neighborhood. That's what made the events of August 15th so much more terrifying than anything we could have imagined. We thought we were safe because we didn't have children. We thought whatever was taking kids from their bedrooms couldn't touch us. We were catastrophically wrong. The evening started normally, or as normally as anything could be during those 2 weeks of neighborhood-wide panic. Laura had gotten home from her shift around 8 p.m., exhausted and dehydrated from the hospital's overwhelmed air conditioning system. I'd spent the day reviewing lesson plans and trying to ignore the constant sound of police sirens and search helicopters that had become the soundtrack of our summer. We ate a late dinner on our back deck, sharing a bottle of wine and trying to have a conversation that didn't revolve around missing children and community terror. The backyard was peaceful, surrounded by the maple trees that gave our street its name. with fireflies beginning to emerge as darkness settled over the suburb. Maybe we should go visit my sister in Colorado, Laura suggested as we watched the fireflies dance above our lawn, just until this whole situation gets resolved. I was tempted by the idea, but leaving felt like abandoning our neighbors and our community during a crisis. The police say they're making progress. Maybe they'll have answers soon. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. 2 weeks of intensive investigation had produced no leads, no suspects, no explanations for how children could disappear from locked rooms in a middle-class suburb with security cameras on every block. Around 9 p.m., we moved inside as the temperature remained oppressive despite the setting sun. We tried watching television, but every local news broadcast focused on the missing children, showing the same school photographs and desperate parent interviews we'd seen dozens of times. Laura went upstairs to take a cold shower while I cleaned up the dinner dishes. That's when I first noticed the sound. It was faint at first, barely audible over the noise of our box fans and the distant hum of neighbors' air conditioning units. A rhythmic tapping, like fingernails against glass, coming from somewhere outside our house. I turned off the kitchen faucet and listened more carefully. The tapping continued, slow and deliberate, tap, tap, tap with a pause, then tap, tap, tap again. It sounded like it was coming from our front windows, but when I looked out, I couldn't see anyone on our porch or in our yard. I walked through the house, checking each window as the tapping seemed to follow me, always coming from just outside whatever room I was in. By the time I'd completed a circuit of the first floor, Laura was calling down from upstairs. "Michael, are you hearing this tapping sound?" "Yeah," I called back. "I think it's coming from outside. It's up here too. Like someone's tapping on all our windows at the same time." The impossibility of that statement hit me immediately. Our house had windows on all 4 sides, spread across 2 floors. No single person could be tapping on all of them simultaneously, and I hadn't seen multiple people outside when I'd checked. I went upstairs to find Laura standing in our bedroom, wrapped in a towel, staring out the window at our backyard. "It stopped," she whispered. And it had. The tapping had ceased as suddenly as it had started, leaving only the normal sounds of a summer evening. Crickets, distant traffic, air conditioning units cycling on and off. Maybe it was tree branches, I suggested, though I knew our trees weren't close enough to any windows to create that sound. Or maybe ice shifting in someone's air conditioner. Laura nodded, but I could tell she didn't believe my explanations any more than I did. We'd both heard rhythmic, deliberate tapping that had seemed to come from multiple directions simultaneously. That wasn't a natural sound or a mechanical malfunction. We tried to return to our evening routine, but both of us were on edge. Laura couldn't concentrate on the book she was reading, and I kept getting distracted from the lesson plans I was trying to review. Every small sound outside made us both look toward the windows. Around 10:30 p.m., we decided to go to bed early, hoping that sleep might provide escape from the anxiety that had been building all evening. But as we were getting ready for bed, the power went out. The sudden darkness was disorienting after hours of artificial light, and the immediate silence when our fans and air conditioning stopped was almost oppressive. Within minutes, the temperature in our bedroom began to climb as the trapped heat from the day reasserted itself. "This is going to be miserable," Laura said as we opened all the bedroom windows and positioned our battery-powered fans to pull in whatever air movement was available outside. I checked my phone and saw that we still had cell service, which was a relief. The power outage appeared to be limited to our immediate area, probably a transformer failure caused by the excessive demand from air conditioning units. We lay in bed for about an hour, trying to sleep despite the heat and the anxiety that had followed us upstairs. Every few minutes, one of us would shift position, searching for a cooler spot on the sheets, or get up to splash cold water on our face from the bathroom sink. Around 11:45 p.m., Laura sat up suddenly in bed. "Michael, look outside." I followed her gaze toward our bedroom window, which faced our backyard, and saw something that made my blood freeze instantly. 6 children were standing on our back lawn in 2 perfect rows, all wearing identical white nightgowns, all staring directly up at our bedroom window. The moonlight was bright enough to see them clearly, and there was no mistaking who they were. Emma Rodriguez, the first child to disappear, standing in the front row on the left, Tommy Walsh next to her, then Sarah Kim. In the back row, Jacob Martinez, and the Peterson twins, Michael and Matthew. All 6 missing children standing in our backyard at midnight, arranged like they were posing for a photograph. "Oh my God," Laura whispered. "We have to call the police." But as I reached for my phone, all 6 children turned their heads toward our window in perfect synchronization. Their faces, which had been in shadow, caught the moonlight, and I could see that something was fundamentally wrong with their expressions. Their eyes were too wide, reflecting light like animals caught in headlights. Their mouths were slightly open, but not in the way children's mouths naturally hang open when they're concentrating or confused. These were the opened mouths of people who are screaming, but no sound was coming out. Most disturbing of all, they weren't blinking. They just stood there, staring up at us with those two wide eyes that reflected moonlight, their mouths open in silent screams, their small bodies perfectly still in formation. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but the call went straight to a recording saying that all circuits were busy. I tried again with the same result. "The phones are jammed," I whispered to Laura. "I can't get through to emergency services." We watched from our window as the children continued their motionless vigil in our backyard. They didn't shift their weight, didn't look around, didn't show any of the natural movement and fidgeting you'd expect from children standing outside in the middle of the night. "This isn't real," Laura said, her voice shaking. "This has to be some kind of hallucination. Maybe we're both having heat-induced delirium." But the children were undeniably there, visible and solid in the moonlight. I could see details of their nightgowns, could make out individual facial features, could even see their bare feet on our grass. That's when I noticed something that made the situation infinitely more horrifying. The children weren't standing on our grass. They were standing about 2 inches above it. I pointed this out to Laura, and we both stared in disbelief as 6 missing children hovered motionless in our backyard, their feet suspended just above the ground, their eyes reflecting moonlight in ways that human eyes shouldn't. "We have to get out of here," Laura whispered. I agreed, but as we started to move away from the window, the children began to move as well, not toward us or away from us, but in a slow, coordinated rotation. Still in perfect formation, still maintaining their spacing, they began to turn in a circle on our lawn like they were performing some kind of ritual dance. But their feet never touched the ground, and their eyes never left our window. The rotation continued for about 5 minutes, during which Laura and I stood frozen by our bedroom window, unable to look away from the impossible scene playing out in our backyard. The children moved with mechanical precision, each step perfectly timed with the others, their formation never wavering. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the rotation stopped. The children were now facing a different direction, but their heads turned back toward our window, those two wide eyes finding us immediately, and then they smiled. All 6 children smiled at exactly the same moment, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp and too numerous for their small mouths. It was the most unnatural, terrifying expression I'd ever seen, like someone who had never seen a human smile trying to imitate the expression from a poorly drawn picture. That's when I heard the tapping again, but this time, it wasn't coming from our windows. It was coming from inside our house. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. The same rhythmic pattern we'd heard earlier, but now it was clearly coming from downstairs, moving through our house like someone was walking from room to room, tapping on walls or furniture. Laura grabbed my arm. "There's someone in our house." I listened carefully, trying to pinpoint the source of the tapping, but it seemed to be coming from multiple locations simultaneously, just like when we'd first heard it outside. "Stay here," I whispered to Laura. "Lock the bedroom door behind me. If anything happens, climb out the window and run to the Thompsons' house." I grabbed a baseball bat from our bedroom closet and crept toward the stairs, leaving Laura barricaded in our room. The tapping continued as I made my way downstairs, always seeming to come from just ahead of me, leading me deeper into our house. In the living room, I found the source of at least some of the sound. Every picture frame on our mantelpiece was vibrating slightly, creating a subtle tapping noise as they shifted against the wooden shelf. But there was no explanation for why they would be vibrating. No machinery running, no traffic outside, no construction or industrial activity that could cause that kind of resonance. I moved through the first floor of our house, checking doors and windows, looking for any sign of forced entry. Everything was still locked from the inside, with no evidence that anyone had entered our house. But the tapping continued, now seeming to come from upstairs. I climbed the stairs quickly, worried about Laura's safety, and found our bedroom door still locked. When she let me in, her face was pale with terror. "They're gone," she said, pointing toward the window. I looked out at our backyard, and she was right. The 6 children had vanished, leaving no trace of their presence on our lawn. "But listen," Laura continued. I stood still and listened carefully. The tapping had stopped, but now there was a new sound. Whispering, very faint, almost inaudible, but definitely human voices whispering in conversation. The sound seemed to be coming from inside our walls, like people were having quiet discussions in the spaces between our rooms. "Do you understand what they're saying?" I asked. Laura shook her head. "It's too quiet, but it sounds like children's voices." We stood in our bedroom listening to the whispered conversations happening inside our walls when my phone finally rang. The caller ID showed that it was my next-door neighbor, Frank Thompson. "Michael, are you okay over there?" Frank's voice was tense and frightened. "My wife and I have been watching from our bedroom window and we saw some kind of disturbance in your backyard." "What did you see?" I asked. "This is going to sound crazy, but it looked like there were children standing in your yard. 6 kids in white clothes just standing there in formation. We were about to call the police when they disappeared." The fact that Frank had witnessed the same thing we'd experienced was both relieving and terrifying. It meant we weren't hallucinating or suffering from heat-induced delirium. But it also meant that whatever we'd seen was real. And if it was real, then the missing children were somehow involved in something that defied natural explanation. "Frank, can you and your wife come over here?" I asked. "I don't think Laura and I should be alone right now." "We're on our way," he replied. While we waited for the Thompsons, the whispering inside our walls continued, sometimes seeming to respond to our conversation, sometimes fading away completely before returning with renewed intensity. Laura had the idea to record the whispers with her phone, hoping we might be able to enhance the audio later to understand what was being said. But when she played back the recording, there was nothing, just silence and the normal sounds of our house settling. "The phone isn't picking up the voices," she said. "How's that possible?" Before I could answer, we heard Frank and his wife Margaret knocking on our front door. When I let them in, both of them looked shaken and exhausted. "We've been watching your house for the past hour," Margaret said. "After we saw those children in your yard, we called the police, but they said all units are busy with emergency calls related to the power outages." Frank added, "We also called the FBI hotline they set up for the missing children cases. We told them we'd seen the missing kids in your backyard, and the agent we spoke to said they'd send someone out as soon as possible." Having the Thompsons in our house made us feel safer, but it also meant that we now had 4 adults trying to make sense of an impossible situation. We gathered in our living room and shared everything we'd experienced, comparing notes and looking for rational explanations. Frank, who worked as an electrical engineer, suggested that the power outage might be related to the strange phenomena we'd witnessed. Electromagnetic disturbances can cause hallucinations, auditory illusions, even shared delusions under certain circumstances. But Margaret, who was a retired school psychologist, disagreed. What we saw was too detailed and too consistent between multiple witnesses. Mass hallucinations don't work that way. As we talked, trying to rationalize what we'd experienced, the whispering in the walls began again. This time, all 4 of us could hear it clearly, and Frank confirmed that his phone also couldn't record the sounds. "Whatever's causing this is affecting our electronic devices," he observed. "The phones can't pick up the whispers. The power is out. Even our flashlights are dimmer than they should be." Around 2 a.m., Margaret made the suggestion that probably saved our lives. "We should leave the house," she said. "Whatever's happening here seems to be focused on this location. If we go somewhere else, maybe we'll be safe until the authorities can investigate." I was reluctant to abandon our home, but the whispering had been getting louder and more frequent, and I'd started to hear what sounded like footsteps in our attic, despite the fact that there's no access to that space from inside our house. We decided to pack quickly and drive to the 24-hour diner on Route 30, where we could wait in a public place with other people until the police or FBI agents arrived. But as we were gathering our belongings, preparing to leave our house, the children came back. This time they weren't in our backyard. They were inside. I was in the kitchen packing snacks for our trip to the diner, when I turned around and saw Emma Rodriguez standing behind me. The 10-year-old girl who had been missing for 2 weeks was standing in my kitchen, wearing the same white nightgown we'd seen in the backyard, staring at me with those 2 wide eyes that reflected light unnaturally. "Hello, Mr. Chen," she said in a voice that sounded like Emma, but with an inflection that was somehow wrong, like someone imitating the way a child speaks without understanding the emotional content. I called out for the others, but when Frank, Margaret, and Laura came running into the kitchen, Emma was gone. But she'd left something behind on our counter. A photograph. A school picture of Emma Rodriguez, identical to the ones that had been circulated by police and shown on news broadcasts. But this photograph was wrong. Emma's smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. Her eyes were the same unnatural, light-reflecting eyes we'd seen in our backyard. "This is impossible," Margaret whispered, picking up the photograph. "How did this get here?" Before anyone could answer, we heard Laura scream from the living room. We ran to find her backing away from the couch where Tommy Walsh was sitting, casually turning the pages of a magazine like he belonged there. The 8-year-old boy looked up at us with that same unnatural smile, his eyes reflecting the light from our flashlights. "Hi, everyone," Tommy said in that same wrong-sounding child's voice. "We've been waiting for you." Frank grabbed Margaret's hand and started toward the front door. "We're leaving, right now." But when he tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge. The deadbolt was unlocked. The chain wasn't engaged, but the door was somehow sealed shut as if it had been welded closed. I ran to the back door and found the same problem. All of our exits were blocked by some force that had nothing to do with locks or physical barriers. "The windows," Laura suggested. But when we tried the windows, the same thing happened. They were unlocked but impossible to open, as if they'd been painted shut or blocked by some invisible barrier. We were trapped in our house with at least 2 of the missing children and possibly all 6 of them. That's when Sarah Kim appeared at the bottom of our staircase, still in her white nightgown, still with those unnatural eyes and that too wide smile. "You can't leave yet," Sarah said in that same wrong inflection. "We haven't finished showing you what we learned while we were away." Jacob Martinez emerged from our hall closet, followed by the Peterson twins from our bathroom. All 6 missing children were now inside our house, arranged in the same formation they'd maintained in our backyard. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emma Rodriguez, who seemed to be their spokesperson, tilted her head in a way that reminded me of a curious dog. "We want to show you where we went," she said, "and we want to take you with us." The room began to grow darker, as if our flashlights were losing power or the shadows were somehow becoming thicker and more substantial. The temperature, which had been oppressive all evening, began to drop rapidly. "Where did you go?" Margaret asked, her professional training as a psychologist apparently overriding her terror. "To the place where children go when they can't sleep on hot summer nights," Tommy Walsh replied. "The place where the air is cool and the darkness is complete, and no one ever has to worry about being hot or scared or alone." The way he described this place made it sound appealing, almost peaceful. But the wrongness in his voice and the inhuman quality of his eyes made it clear that whatever they were describing was anything but peaceful. "We don't want to go anywhere," Laura said firmly. "We want you to leave our house and go back to your families." All 6 children laughed at exactly the same moment, and the sound was like nothing I'd ever heard. It was laughter, but laughter that had been broken down and reconstructed by something that didn't understand what humor was supposed to sound like. "Our families," Sarah Kim repeated, still laughing that broken laughter. "Our families are sleeping. They're dreaming about us, and in their dreams we never left. In their dreams we're still in our beds, safe and sound and exactly where we're supposed to be." The implications of what she was saying began to sink in. If the children's families were dreaming that their kids were still safe in their beds and the children were here in our house, then what had happened to the real children? Were these the actual missing kids? Or were they something else wearing the children's appearance? Frank asked the question that all of us were thinking. "Are you really Emma and Tommy and Sarah? Or are you something else that looks like them?" The Peterson twins answered in perfect unison, their voices overlapping in a way that created an echo effect. "We are them, and we are not them. We are what they became when they went to the cool place where children go to escape the heat. We are what you will become when you come with us." The darkness in our living room was now so complete that our flashlights could barely penetrate it. The 6 children were visible, but everything else, our furniture, the walls, even each other, was disappearing into shadows that seemed to have substance and weight. "I understand now," Margaret said quietly, and there was a strange calm in her voice that terrified me. "They're not trying to hurt us. They're trying to help us. They're offering us escape from the heat, from the fear, from all the suffering of being awake during these terrible nights." "Margaret, no," Frank said urgently. "Don't listen to them. This isn't help. This is something else entirely." But I could feel the appeal of what the children were offering. The temperature in our house had been unbearable. The stress of the missing children cases had consumed our entire community, and the fear of what was happening to our neighborhood had been growing for weeks. The idea of going to a cool, dark place where none of those problems existed was genuinely tempting. That's when I realized what they were doing. They weren't just offering escape. They were offering a form of death that was disguised as relief. "This is how it happened, isn't it?" I said to Emma Rodriguez. "This is how you convinced the other children to come with you. You appeared to them on hot nights when they couldn't sleep, and you offered them a way to escape the heat and the discomfort." Emma's unnatural smile grew even wider. "Smart, Mr. Chen. Yes, that's exactly how it happened. And it will happen to more children and more adults until everyone in your neighborhood understands what we're offering. The shadows continued to deepen around us, and I could feel my resistance to their offer beginning to weaken. The idea of cool darkness, of escape from the oppressive heat and the community fear, was becoming more appealing by the minute. But Laura grabbed my hand and squeezed it hard, a signal that helped me focus on reality instead of the seductive promise the children were making. "Fight it," she whispered. "Whatever they're doing to our minds, we have to fight it." Frank and Margaret were both staring at the children with glazed expressions, clearly being affected by the same mental influence that was working on me. I tried to think of something that would break the spell, some way to resist the offer of escape that was becoming more tempting with each passing second. That's when I remembered something from my high school teaching experience. Sometimes, when students were having behavioral problems or acting out in ways that were clearly cries for help, the most effective intervention was simply acknowledging their pain and offering real assistance. "You're scared," I said to the 6 children. "You didn't choose to go to this place. Something took you there and now you're trapped, and the only way you know how to escape is by bringing other people with you." For the first time since they'd appeared in our backyard, the children's expressions changed. The unnatural smiles faded, and their 2 wide eyes began to show something that looked almost human. "We can't get back," Emma Rodriguez said, and now her voice sounded like a real child, frightened and lost. "We try to go home, but we can only reach the edge of the cool place. And it's so lonely there, Mr. Chen. We just want other people to come with us so we won't be alone." The shadows in our living room began to lighten slightly, and I could see Frank and Margaret shaking their heads as if waking up from a dream. "What if we helped you get back instead of coming with you?" Laura suggested. "What if we found a way to return you to your families?" All 6 children looked at her with expressions of hope mixed with doubt. "No one has ever offered to help us get back," Sarah Kim said. "Everyone who sees us either runs away or agrees to come with us to the cool place." "We're not running away," I said, "and we're not going with you, but maybe we can find another solution." That's when the first rays of sunlight began to appear through our windows. The summer night was finally ending, and with the dawn, the children began to fade. "We have to go back when the sun comes up," Tommy Walsh explained, his voice growing fainter as the light increased. "But we'll try to find you again tomorrow night, if you really want to help us get home." One by one, the 6 missing children disappeared as our living room filled with natural light. Within minutes, they were gone completely, leaving only the memory of their presence and the strange, wrong photographs they'd left behind. The doors and windows that had been sealed shut during the night opened normally in the morning light. Our phones had full signal strength again. The power came back on as if nothing had ever been wrong with the electrical grid. But Frank, Margaret, Laura, and I knew that something profound had happened during that night. Something that challenged everything we thought we understood about life, death, and the nature of reality. We called the FBI hotline and told them about our encounter with the missing children. The agents who came to investigate were skeptical at first, but the photographs the children had left behind were impossible to explain. The images showed the missing kids, but with features that were subtly wrong in ways that suggested they weren't entirely human anymore. The investigation that followed revealed that other families in our neighborhood had experienced similar encounters over the past 2 weeks. Children appearing at windows, offering escape from heat and fear, trying to convince people to come with them to some undefined place that promised relief from suffering. Most people had dismissed these encounters as heat-induced hallucinations or stress-related dreams, but a few families, like ours, had documented evidence that suggested something much more disturbing was happening. The case was eventually classified as an ongoing investigation, but no official conclusions were ever reached. The missing children were never found, their families never got closure, and our neighborhood never fully recovered from the fear that had gripped us during those 2 weeks in August. Laura and I moved away from Millbrook 6 months later. We couldn't tolerate the memory of that night, and we couldn't shake the feeling that the children might return to continue their search for companions in whatever place they'd been taken to. But sometimes, on particularly hot summer nights, I still think about Emma Rodriguez and Tommy Walsh and the other 4 children who appeared in our backyard. I wonder if they're still trying to get home, still searching for adults who might be able to help them escape from the cool, dark place where they've been trapped. And I wonder if other children, in other neighborhoods, during other unbearably hot summer nights, are being visited by figures in white nightgowns who promise escape from discomfort and fear. The experience taught me that there are forms of danger that don't announce themselves with obvious threats or violence. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who offer exactly what you want most in your moments of greatest vulnerability. That summer night in 2024 lasted only a few hours, but its impact has lasted much longer. It changed how I think about community, safety, and the responsibility we have to protect each other from threats that we don't fully understand. I still don't know what happened to those 6 children, where they went, or what force was using their appearance to try to lure others into the same fate. But I know that they were real, that their suffering was genuine, and that somewhere they might still be trying to find their way home. The longest night of my life ended with sunrise, but the questions it raised have never been answered. And on hot summer nights, when the temperature doesn't drop and the darkness seems thicker than it should be, I still listen for the sound of children whispering inside the walls.